Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another discussion video. Today, we're going to talk about 10 cards you should consider sideboarding for February 2021. A lot of the times, these videos have looked the same, at least in more recent months, because there's been a lot of sideboard staples. But honestly, this time around, this has shifted up a lot. There are a lot of new cards to consider sideboarding that we will talk about in today's video. So if you want to be more well-equipped for the meta, whether you're competing in some online events, some IRL events, or maybe even just your local, you'll want to check this video out and see what kind of cards there are to combat different strategies in the meta. So if you guys are new here, definitely subscribe, hit that bell so you miss a video. If you guys want to help support the channel, there are many links down in the description that will help do so. Particularly today, if you want to buy any of the cards you see in today's video, or any cards for that matter, use my link in the description to TCG Player. It does give the channel a small percentage kickback, but it really does help out a lot, guys. I do appreciate each and every one of you that does those things down in the description for the channel. That being said, let's get started. Number 1, Supreme Kai of Time Disruptor. This card is actually quite old and hasn't really seen much competitive play in a long time, but there actually is a reason to reconsider this card again. This is a 1-drop black battle card. Play this card, and battle cards with energy cost of 2 or less cannot attack until the start of your opponent's next turn, and when it's played during, the counterplay timing, or when you just play it for 1, you draw 1. So there's very little downside to siding this, but it's only going to be good when there are obviously 2 or less battle cards you need to stop from attacking. What are the particular ones in this format you're trying to stop? Well, the number 1 offender is Piccolo Jr., Eradicator of Peace, mostly in the launch deck. Now, we know we're also getting a lot of red-green support in Evolution Booster. We have decks like Nappa and other red-green decks as well, like King Vegeta, that might see some resurgence in the metagame. And most red-green decks, they're probably going to play that Piccolo. That Piccolo is honestly just the best card in red-green right now. It's honestly insane. Attack, Alliance, draw 2 cards, burn your opponent for 1 if they're 3 or higher life. And, he starts at 16k double strike, so just adding a 5k, 21k double strike with all those added effects, Alliance, other things like your 20k arrivals. It gets high in power very quickly. Now, you really want to have the ability to answer a card like Piccolo. Some decks have different answers, like in green, for instance, you would have Frieza Charismatic Villain. That's a really good answer, but if you're not playing green, you might want to consider Supreme Kai of Time Disruptor. That's really the main offender when it comes to 2 or less that are attacking, but this card could see some flexibility in future formats, so just having a playset of it on hand is definitely a good idea in my opinion. I've had this thing, I think it came out in the first anniversary box. I've had my playset ever since then because it's a card that you can just go back and look at. If it's ever relevant in a format, you can just pick it up. Now, one thing you're going to want to consider though is that this also stops you from attacking with battle cards of cost 2 or less. So for instance, this is a black battle card, so you might think about this in a mono black deck, but if you're playing Gogeta Xeno, for instance, you might not want to sideboard this card because that means that you cannot then attack with your 1-drops on your next turn. Part of that whole strategy is kind of like this weenie rush with 1-drops. So you wouldn't really want to counterplay with this because it would also kind of floodgate you, which is something you wouldn't want. But that leads me to say that this is also a good side deck card against Gogeta Xeno. Not that I think Gogeta Xeno is one of the top decks of the meta or anything, but it is a rogue deck you may go against. So you could have that dual purpose in the sideboard, for the meta deck that is launched, but also it'll help cover your bases if you play against some sort of 1-drop spam like Gogeta Xeno. Next up, we have Son Goku striving to be the best. Very much the same thing as Supreme Kai of Time Disruptor, except this is much more specifically for blue, and this lingers around. It's a 2-drop barrier battle card. Again, very old card. Came out in Clash of Fates, I think the first, maybe, or I guess the 3rd theme booster, but still quite an old card, and it's really good for blue in this scenario because the decks that are playing Piccolo Eradicator of Peace and as well as Gogeta Xeno, if you want to consider that, they do have a somewhat tough time dealing with barrier. Now, actually, now that I think about it, Gogeta Xeno actually answers barrier very easily, so you probably wouldn't want to play this card against Gogeta Xeno. But against launch, they don't have the best time dealing with barrier. None of their stuff in the main deck deals with barrier, so playing this, if you're playing blue, could be a really good call if launch gives you a tough time. One of the blue decks that's really popular right now is Blue Baby. That's just the hyper end of all things control, right? So playing this 2-drop that prevents your opponent from attacking with 2s or less, that could be a really good call if you're playing Blue Baby or trying to make any blue deck work for that matter. Think about Soul Striker. You want to play your Unison on turn 3, maybe you'll play like a 1-drop on turn 1, but what are you doing on turn 2? A lot of times you're resolving Sand Instincts if you have that card, but besides that, you could very easily play Son Goku striving to be the best on 2, stop your opponent from having a crazy aggro turn with Piccolo Jr., and then go to turn 3, play your Unison, stabilize, do all that kind of stuff. So I do think this is a very good card if you're in blue, or even if you're splashing blue. Again, keep in mind, multicolor is getting support in Evolution Booster, so you might be playing a blue multicolor deck where you can play this for the 1 blue specified cost. So just want to keep those cards in your minds. Next up, Kami Global Unifier, another very old card that has not seen play in quite some time. This was actually really popular during the time that Skillless was quite good, because they could play 3 or 4 Skillless battle cards by turn 3, turn 4 very easily. You'd play this guy, pay 2 additional energy, wipe their board, quite good. Why is this card seeing a comeback? Well, believe it or not, Kami is here to destroy his Namekian friends. It's really good against the King Piccolo deck. King Piccolo is a deck that's starting to see a surge in popularity. Red in general is starting to become a lot more playable, a lot more meta defining. You have King Piccolo, you have Launch, you have Red Broly, things like that. But Kami Global Unifier is really good against King Piccolo matchup because they play all their Demon Clan cards for 0 cost. They play several of them in one turn if they're able to. They'll at least play one on their turn and one on your turn every time their Awakened Leader attacks. So that's going to add up very quickly. Their board's going to get very massive. So Kami Global Unifier, several players cited it in the PPG webcam event from the previous weekend. It is a good card for that matchup in particular. Next up, we have Protector of the People. Okay, so another card to help combat King Piccolo, but realistically, this card is good in a lot of matchups. Let me explain. So, King Piccolo, they swing with a lot of 15Ks. They swing with the occasional 20K as well. You have like Piccolo Jr. King Scion, as well as Piccolo New Ruler. Those are the 20Ks they attack with, but for the most part, they're attacking with a lot of 15Ks. Decks that have Senzu Bean types effects, like red with Korin Secret Tower Medicine, and then blue with Senzu Bean, that's going to be a really valuable defensive card for the King Piccolo kind of go in turn. But if you're not playing blue or red or Sin Shenron that now has a Senzu Bean, you might want to consider Protector of the People. If you're in red, if you're in green, if you're in black, these colors that don't have these Senzu Bean types of effects. So a card you'll want to consider, but it's also good against general aggro. Like, it's really good against low to the ground aggro, also pretty good against Gogeta Xeno. Funny enough that so many of these things overlap and also hit Gogeta Xeno. But even if you have an aggro deck that like kind of plays somewhere in the middle, like they play 20Ks, they play 25Ks, it is also okay against Red Broly. You know, they are going to be continuously ripping your hand, so it does kind of suck this has a discard cost in that scenario, but it can help you survive the Red Broly all-in turn. The only deck this is not like amazing against is Dark Broly, because their battle cards are already big enough. They're already 30K, so by the time Protector ramps up to be a more relevant defensive tool, it's probably going to be a little bit too late. But I mean, if there's only one deck in the format this doesn't do great work against, it's probably worth considering. It's also incredibly cheap right now. This is an SR of a draft box that once upon a time was anywhere from $10 to $20. Now I think on TCG Player they're less than $2 because it got reprinted in the Ultimate Toa deck. So definitely a good value pickup there. You'll definitely want to have it in your back pocket. Next up, Bigamour. If you're playing green, side deck this card. This card is so good. One of the top decks right now. Arguably, in my opinion, the best deck might be Dark Broly. And whether that's the case or not, we know Dark Broly is incredibly popular. Actually wasn't too popular at the PPG webcam event, so maybe there's like a meta shift away from Dark Broly. I'd have to look more into that, but you know, for weeks and weeks before that, Dark Broly was picking up a lot of steam and popularity. So if you're in green, you're going to want Bigamour. It's also got some reach against Red Broly because they do attack with their 5-drop. Their 5-drop is one of their main sources of pressure. And then if they get to their 6-drop, well, it might be just GG from there. But Bigamour will prevent them from attacking with that 6-drop. So that can definitely be quite helpful in that scenario. Next up, we have a slew of 1-drop counterplay cards. Every single color has one. You can just ignore the yellow one. It's basically a Crusher Ball that actually has a life requirement, so that's really not great at all. But we have like Beerus Ball, we have Super Kamehameha. Blue and green also have their respective forms of these cards. And they're all good in different situations, right? So Super Kamehameha, what I really like about it is that against Red Broly, you're able to actually counterplay the Piccolo Jr. Ultimate when they play the Pan and then another attacker or a super combo, whatever the case is. You can respond to that with this and stop that whole thing. The Fearless Pan, when they resolve the Fearless Pan, they're probably going to win the game that turn. So having this to defend against that is incredible. Beerus Ball is great for red decks that need to play around Frieza Charismatic Villain, because Frieza Charismatic Villain's an on-play auto. So if you negate the play of it with Beerus Ball, you stop that on-play auto from actually popping your battle card, which is really strong. For blue and for green, they do have some niche scenarios. The green one, Focus Breakthrough, does help you stop things like Topo, help stop things like SS2 Heroic Prospects. They do have some reach there. The blue one's not bad. It does bounce the card back to the opponent's hand, but it also does untap an energy. So if you use it for one, you untap the one, but also if you use it by taking a life, which there's a clause in that card that allows you to do that, you'll actually be going from potentially tapped out to +1 energy, or, you know, however much energy you had to +1 energy, which is a really solid return if you just need that energy back for additional defense. Next up, Secret Identity Masked Saiyan. This card's one we always usually talk about ever since it came out. It's just that good of a card. Board wiping is absolutely incredible. So many decks right now, they tend to go wide. King Piccolo, take out 2/3 drops. Launch, take out the Piccolo Junior Eradicator piece plus any number of their alliance targets. This card is incredible. And even against Dark Broly, like taking out 1/6 drop, it's not the best, don't get me wrong. There's a better Overwhelm SS3 Bardock Fully Unleashed if you want to specifically deal with Dark Broly. But if you're looking to kind of just like cover all your bases, this is still not bad against Dark Broly because you can take out their blocker, possibly go for game if this scenario presents itself. Next up, we have my King Piccolo's Underling. I hate to do this, but blue is getting a little bit more popular now. Blue Baby is a deck that has top 2 events in a row. We even saw Michael Carrick's Trunks list in the top 4 of the PPG webcam event, so you might want to have your blue Silver Bullets on deck. I really honestly just wish these cards didn't exist, but they do, so with that in mind, you might want to have them. Dark Power Black Mass Sand. This is one that's always at the start of the video, and I kept it to the end, one, just to get some new cards into your guys' faces so it wasn't the same thing over and over again, but also, two, I think this card is honestly getting a bit worse. Like, this card actually hits almost every single set 12 deck. Not all the set 12 decks are in the meta. There are a handful of them, like Launch, but and King Piccolo, and this card does hit those decks to a degree, but Red answers this thing so easily that it's almost not even worth siding in. Like, Dark Power Black Man Sand's weird because it's super good if you go first and play it on 1, but if you go second or don't see it on 1, it is so much worse for the rest of the game. So maybe consider it, but honestly, there might be better side deck cards you could consider. It is such a staple, though, that I felt like we had to talk about it and kind of talk about the pros and cons, because so many people are probably already siding it that I kind of want to just play a little bit devil's advocate and just say, hey, you might want to consider this or that. One card that is definitely not questionable, Bigamour the Broken Seal. This card is ridiculous. I still think it's hilarious how it was really unplayable in set 10, but ever since set 11, we've gotten much more linear strategies, and this card just really destroys those strategies. Like, don't get me wrong, playing Bigamour won't automatically win you the game, but it can buy you that turn you need against Dark Broly. It can buy you that turn you need against Red Gogeta or Green Gotenks. These types of decks that rely on one sole boss monster turn after turn, Bigamour is amazing against. With that being said, guys, that's going to be the 10 cards for February you should consider sideboarding. Let me know in the comments below if you have another consideration, just so your fellow Dragon Ball Super players can see it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.